people want to do stuff with their Bitcoin, man. They're getting bored. They're sitting on their hands over here. I think that there's some things to do in the whole degen ways right now, and I don't think there's any coincidence that Bitcoin's up right now. Whether that has anything correlated to do with the stock market or more of just this whole degen culture that we're starting to see. That's out for the discussion.
How hard were you fighting back to the urge? Like maybe it has something to do with Arch. Like I know you wanted to say it. I know it was like on the tip of your tongue. You were like, it's maybe because of us, bro.
Well, I've been on the record to say we're going to save everyone's bags, runes included. So, I'm not going to take that back now.
Welcome to the ATX DAO podcast, the hub for exploring the forefront of blockchain technology in Austin's Web3 community. We connect you with innovators within ATX DAO and beyond as we venture into the world of decentralized technology. So crack open a beer and join us for a front row seat to learn about the innovations and trends shaping our digital future. This is the ATX DAO podcast.
I'm just so glad that actually I ran into Matt there, Startup Lab event, right? Like I think that's where we were running into each other. But it's just great because it's funny because like we were also talking about this earlier, how like you have a group of people that you see all the time and you're like, you know them through a series of interactions at conferences. And I feel like that's like Matt is one of them. Like I know Matt and Amin through the Startup Lab program, but like it's kind of funny. I've seen Matt a lot at these conferences and I'm like, Amin is just like locked away in Morocco, just like fucking just hammering out code, just like mad, like working away like a mad goblin in the basement, bro. But gotta say, these two are like legit founders, man. The vibes are on point by meeting these two. So I'm super glad to have y'all on here.
Yeah, it's founder mode for both of us, but it just means a little separate or two different things, I guess, in context of Arch. Obviously I'm all over the world trying to meet with investors and you guys at these side events and making sure that the vibes are good from an ecosystem perspective. But then, of course, Amin is leading the vibes internally with the product team, which is getting bigger and bigger every day, which is awesome to see.
That's awesome, man. I got to ask, dude, okay, so outside, did you guys know each other before the Startup Lab? Did you guys meet at the Startup Lab? How was that first interaction like? Because it's like, I know some people in the program, like, you have to find your co-founder, but for you guys, like you guys found it. I was just curious, what was that first DM like? Was it just a straight dick pic from Amin to be like, hey, what's up, bro?
Yeah, that's it. No, actually, like Albert from Startup Lab actually introduced us both. I was like, we're both like looking for co-founders, and because like it's so important to have like the right co-founder, and once like Albert introduced us together, it just like clicked. Just like feel it in a way that I didn't feel with like anyone else. Yeah.
That's awesome. It was love at first sight, huh? You were like, dude,
Yeah,
this is
for
my
real.
homie. We're gonna ride or die together.
Pretty much, yeah. I think that like there were some other people that we were working with before, and much like they encourage people to pivot their ideas and just kind of feel out different ideas and finding or invalidating those ideas more importantly, they encourage the same with people. And I think that like Albert knew that I was an experienced entrepreneur coming in, and then probably knew that Amin was extremely accomplished dev, and so that he really wanted us to meet each other. And at that point, we kind of just bailed on the other people who were probably a little less focused or a little less driven, and that's what we really kind of aligned on initially. We spent like all of Thanksgiving, weekend, kind of working through the holidays, just trying to refine those customer interviews and get it in a way where we felt like we were confident going out into the next part of the year. Which is pretty much what we did, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. I gotta ask, Arch, who named it Arch, and why is it Arch?
It's like it's kind of funny. I mean, we were extensively workshopping this. We really couldn't think of anything that was that compelling, and I kind of like fancy myself a brand expert, whatever you want to call that. But I knew it had to be like, being in crypto, it has to be something abstract, short and sweet, like one syllable, that kind of stuff. So we really wanted to start with that. So just like random words we were throwing back and forth. But then this whole this whole like it's a bridge but not bridge kind of thing with a double entendre of arch, and an archway can sort of mean a bridge but not really at the same time. It's a completely different architectural structure. So we kind of rolled with that a little bit, and it just stuck, to be honest. Checks the boxes from the short one syllable abstract for sure, and then just whether or not it actually fit the vibe. It just stuck over time, and I think that we found a good one. And then the logo creator that Amin knew from Morocco, like this was the very first one. He like came up with like 20 different concepts, but this was the first one that we saw. The logo that you see today, and we're like, no, that's the one. That's it. It's perfect. Which is kind of like 4 parallel lines that are kind of bent into an archway. So I thought that was fairly
and it's kind of like plays also into like how we're doing like things in parallel, and you can see like a lot of stuff that we're like actually doing into like the branding, which is really cool.
That's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to digging into that, the frost and roast stuff, but I'm guessing that's like the parallelized VM stuff that you're kind of like pursuing as well.
Yeah,
right? That's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Like we're very inspired from the SVM. We did like take a lot of stuff from them, and we did like learn a lot of lessons from the ethic versus the modular debates, and like the way Bitcoin works. Like modular just works better, and you need to do stuff in parallel, or else the user experience is gonna be shitty, and we don't really want that.
I think another like really interesting point that people don't quite understand is like inspired by SVM or like forked of the SVM. People are like, is it the SVM? Is it a fork of the SVM? Like, no. Like literally Amin and the team re-engineered it, figured out what stack the SVM is built on, which is a fork of this like, I mean, you explained it. BPF is just like a totally different, thing.
It was used initially for like packet filters for like networking stuff. It's actually used on Facebook, Google, like all the big tech players like use BPF and eBPF, and like the Solana guys just like forked this like implementation in Rust and just like used that. And like I was going through like their code and like discovered the actual repo they forked from. And we just like and you can't really like fork the SVM because like it's like accounts model, and really like on UTXOs try to abstract like the UTXO stuff as much as possible, because like UTXOs are just hard to use in general. So, but it's like a mixture between like account and UTXOs. This provides like the best user experience possible on Bitcoin, which we're still refining.
Yeah, so it's like it's not a fork of the SVM at all. It's literally as low level as we could go, and it re-engineering pretty much how the SVM was built on this forked repo of eBPF. And Amin and the team figured that out, and we knocked it out of the park. So I think that they deserve a lot of credit for that.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I would love to. Like, I mean, that's really interesting that you guys identified that in the beginning, right? Because like I know there's a lot of Bitcoin EVM L2s on Bitcoin. Right. The obvious or the next obvious kind of play would be like, let's just do Solana VM on Bitcoin, right? Like maybe, I don't know. I haven't looked into that problem, but I'm sure you guys were like, looked at it and you were like, oh no, let's actually really take this apart and come up with something new, which is like much more of a novel use case, which is very interesting. I would love to hear about that thought process, like as to like, why no Solana VM? Why would you be like, hey, let's improve upon, I mean, you obviously improved upon it, but like, why did you choose this particular route? I'm just curious to see why this virtual machine.
Yeah, so our first like thing was to like, before like starting to think about like scaling anything, we basically like need to max out like block space on Bitcoin. Right now the fees on Bitcoin L1 are like 2 to 3 like sats per VByte, which is like really bad. So we need to like saturate the block space on Bitcoin L1 before the need for people to like go after scaling solutions. So like we needed a solution that like would work on Bitcoin L1 to like trigger smart contracts on the L1, trigger Bitcoin transactions directly on the L1. Like asset transfers and state transitions need to be atomic, so like you can't have like double spends, and also like leave the room for like scalability. And if you really like see how Bitcoin works, like UTXOs are like processed in parallel. And if you just like put state in a UTXO, and if that state is global for like the whole VM, you can really like do one transaction per block for the whole like chain, which is like really bad. You can also like do one state per program, which would kind of work, but there are like also limitations around how many transactions you can chain together on Bitcoin. You can only like chain 25 transactions. So you really like need to dig deeper and like also parallelize the states within the smart contracts. And you need to be able to like you need to be able to like only write to state that has changed and state that is being read, of course, doesn't need to change. But yeah, like the most similar architecture for what we need is the SVM, but obviously we need to change like a lot of stuff for it to be able to work with Bitcoin.
I think that also like what Amin is basically saying is like when you go as low level to the stack as possible, you can create certain considerations in the design and how things ultimately are built around that construct. And when you the higher up the stack that you build, you don't have that flexibility. You kind of have to work within the rules or the frameworks of however that design was constructed. So when it comes to these EVM rollups or these copy and pasted type of design, they're not taking into consideration anything to do with Bitcoin because that's not what they were initially built for. And when it comes to Arch and how our design is ultimately constructed, we've gone as low level to the code as possible, and we've gotten from the bottom up as opposed to the top down, and that's what allows us to optimize for user experience because we have total flexibility in the way that we've designed the system. I mean, is that generally accurate?
Yeah, I always say that like you always need to build like things from the top down, unless you're building it the first time. So like if you don't really like if you don't really take those considerations and just like launch an L2 with like the most random tag that you can find and just like launch as soon as possible, that gives you a disadvantage at the end, and like other people are gonna outcompete you. So really like need to take into consideration like what chain are you working on? What's the most optimal design in order for this to work long term?
So y'all were talking about the user experience in general. So I think maybe we should kind of set the stage for folks that aren't familiar with Arch as to kind of what problem are we solving. So I think one of the things that's really cool about what y'all have built is that there's no bridging required. So y'all enable folks to do a lot more with Bitcoin than you could otherwise natively on chain. So I'd love for you to just kind of maybe just give a little bit of context in terms of like the problems that you're solving and all of that. That'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. There's a few different elements where we feel that user experience is drastically impacted in a positive way by using an app that's built on Arch. And one of the most obvious and first things is that you get to use your Bitcoin wallet. Like that might seem like a thing that we all take for granted, but the reality is there's a lot of solutions in terms of programmability and scalability that forces you to use a MetaMask wallet or forces you to use the exclusive wallet that's linked to whatever meta protocol that we're discussing. So like that's a first order UX improvement right there, is that no matter what Bitcoin wallet you use, you can participate in whichever application that's built on Arch because we're on the exact same curve as all of these Bitcoin wallets. And these are UTXOs and Bitcoin transactions at the end of the day. That's the way that you interact with the Arch network. So that's number one. Number two, this whole concept of bridgeless programmability, that's something that we pretty much coined that term, and that's where the majority of the friction and the drop off really is for users, right? They don't want to give up the sovereignty of their assets by locking it in a bridge so that they could mint it on some other chain, because you could have the safest layer 2 or side chain and signer network imaginable, but if the bridge gets exploited, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because you're trusting in a completely different party with it. So we basically, meet users exactly where they are on the trust spectrum, whether they want to self-custody their assets and participate in these atomic swaps. They have the flexibility to do that. Of course, when you are anchored to Bitcoin, the bottleneck is going to be Bitcoin itself. So this is slow and clunky compared to, the more scalable transaction type that we also have as well, which is going to be more Solana performance and speed. But again, that comes with additional trust assumptions, maybe additional forms of yield and better user experience once you kind of bridge into the network. When I put the air quotes on there for the people that aren't seeing the video, but it all depends on what you're trying to do in the network and who you're willing to trust. There's some elements of trust in the verifier network where there's hard economic security and a decentralized signer network, and then there's other role dependent trust assumptions that are completely trustless and you trust nobody. So there's both options, which I think is important for the user.
No, that's awesome. Because to your point, like otherwise, if you wanted to do things like that, you'd have to bridge it. You'd have to use wrap Bitcoin on another chain, maybe an L2, those kinds of things. So I think it's huge. So maybe can you give a couple examples of what folks can do with it? Because I think it's opening up a lot more possibilities to what you can do. Like maybe examples of that.
Yeah, I think really where our technology shine, and I'll let kind of Amin go through the the user experience or the transaction flow is a DEX or an AMM. I think this is really what RIMs and BRC20 generally need to get that next level of or wave up of growth, because right now we're on this peer-to-peer order book style of trading, which is not how other programmable chains like Ethereum and Solana trade. You have deep pools of liquidity. You've got thousands of people who contribute to that liquidity. And then whoever wants to walk up to that pool and take some, via this automatic swap, that code and that atomic ability exists on those other chains, which up until recently has not been the case in Bitcoin. And that's really where our technology shines a bit, because takers of that liquidity are truly trustless and atomic. So, why don't you kind of walk them through how the AMM works on Bitcoin and who we're working with?
So on the AMM example, there are like two sides of the market. There are like makers who make the market, and there are takers. The makers basically like deposit into liquidity pools in order to provide the liquidity. They provide the liquidity, and they do take some risk by sending their Bitcoin to like the verifier network, which is like basically a frost and roast multi-sig. And there are the takers on the other side, who are people basically trading against that liquidity that's on the pools. The takers send a PSBT to the smart contract, which the smart contract then takes and adds like the corresponding UTXOs from the liquidity pool. And then that smart contract publishes a Bitcoin transaction that has state transitions and asset transfers in the same transaction. So the transaction is atomic. You either like get your swap or nothing happens. So like it's really like it's really trustless. Like the takers do not take on any additional trust assumption, and we think that's really powerful. And the makers do take on additional trust assumptions, but they also get like yield from providing that liquidity. So I think that risk is rewarded. And also just to add like to what Matt was saying earlier, a big reason for like why runes and the ordinary market have been like in a slump lately is because like it's really hard to bootstrap like a token or like a community without like that liquidity at the beginning. And this is why AMMs were created in the first time. Because like order books, someone needs to come in, or like multiple people need to come in and provide like deep liquidity in order for the order books to even work. And without that, you can't really like, and for a meme coin, like who's gonna provide the liquidity? Like no one. And they need to be like a sophisticated entity too, in order to like provide that liquidity inside an order book. So the AMM solves this like really big 0 to 1 chicken and egg problem.
I think it's also like important to like think about, when users deposit funds into a pool on Uniswap, no one considers that bridging to a different chain or layer, right? Like you take on trust assumptions with the verifier network that is on proof of stake with the EVM and those nodes, right? And then of course trust assumptions on the smart contract risk that you're participating in. So like users definitely do take on trust assumptions when they participate in DeFi and other chains like Ethereum. It's just, what are we trusting, and what are the, the attack vectors of that system? So that's something that I think that like users in Bitcoin are going to be increasingly more comfortable with as time goes on. There's been, sort of what we know as the laser eye maxis, on one side of the trust spectrum, which is we take on no trust. We want to keep our Bitcoin in a cold storage and do nothing with it. And then on the other side, you're going to see this whole other camp forming, out of this whole runes and ordinals community called the yield maxis, who are the ones that are going to actually be bobbing and weaving between various trust spectrums and different chains so that they can actually find forms of yield. So I think the first iteration that we saw of that was with Babylon, and there's a tremendous amount of demand with Bitcoin coming in, wanting to find some of that yield. And there's going to be other opportunities as time goes on with other DeFi constructs that present more sustainable forms of yield, whether that's LPing in a DEX or into these borrow and lending pools on platforms like Liquidity. We think that that's going to keep on proliferating as time goes on and as the infrastructure gets better and better.
That's pretty awesome. I got to ask then, like the Verify network over here, can you talk a little bit more about that? And what is your roadmap for that? Because I know that's like a big bootstrapping kind of thing, right? It's like when you talk about an AMM, it's kind of like there's the initial liquidity problem. When it comes to network, like that's the initial problem. How do you create incentive mechanisms for a Verify network to come along and then basically run this consensus mech that you're newly running, right? Because you need other operators to come in and be like, bro, I'm going to run this. How would you think about that? How are you guys addressing that issue? What is your roadmap for that?
I think with bootstrapping any network like this, it's actually a fantastic point because there's lots of other projects or lots of other infra and design that propose that they're going to have a signer network and it's going to scale and all this. Like it's a pretty hefty assumption to just assume that there's going to be people willing to run hardware and have like consistent operational cost. Let's forget about the onboarding cost of like learning how to become a signer in a network, but like the ongoing operational cost to continue to run those servers and run that hardware at their whatever facility that they're on. Assuming these are like commercial validators, in which case this is a business, they need to get paid and make money. Otherwise, they're not a very good business, right? If it's not a commercial validator, then I question like how much of a priority is this in these people's lives? Like if it's just a project that is an AMM on the network or something, like sure their interests might be aligned, but are they actually like prioritizing uptime and speed of consensus and things of that nature, which are extremely important in growing an ecosystem and making sure that a network scales. So like there needs to be a full feedback loop and incentive mechanism in order to continue to attract some of these commercial entities. So part of that, of course, like we're blessed to have a lot of the top investors in crypto ecosystem with multi-coin, CMS, big brain holdings, very aligned in the Solana ecosystem from that standpoint as well. So there's already like there's a crazy amount of interest from the commercial validators who want to support the next like growing ecosystem as they've seen Solana sort of scale over the last 5 years. Now it's getting to the point where MEV is, the income that they're getting from MEV is just totally dwarfing the amount of emissions that they were receiving from gas and the inflationary emissions that the Solana network pays, or the foundation pays these validators. So like they've seen how it goes full circle after a network scales and how that means or how much that means to their bottom line. So first step is like, obviously we lean a lot on the signal and strategic value from our investors to have those relationships and that credibility with a lot of these commercial validators. But then also it comes down to our incentive model, right? Like we actually need to show to these commercial entities that we have thoughtfully put into account how this network scales from an economics perspective and how the gas fees can turn into whatever it turns into and what our inflationary mechanics can be that can bootstrap some of that interest while the on-chain activity is still somewhat immature. But as that on-chain activity scales, certainly there will be MEV opportunities and ways to optimize for the yield that they're going to be receiving for supporting the infrastructural element of this network. So I think like the initial question is like it's generally hard to bootstrap and scale a network, but as long as you are fully aligned with your infrastructure providers and they understand exactly how they make money long term, they will support you. And then, of course, as the allure of the Arch network and the scale of it kind of increases, there's going to be further and further interest with more node operators who want to continue to take part in that opportunity. It becomes more competitive over time. And that's how the network ultimately decentralizes from that point. So I think that's like scaling a network 101. I mean, maybe you have like 201 or some better insights than that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Also, one thing that that we've been like thinking about a lot regarding that is like, what about Bitcoin? Like, probably a lot of people don't like hearing this, but Bitcoin has like a security budget issue. Like, the fees are not there. Like each half in the blocks gets cut in half. Like, what happens if there are no rewards? How is Bitcoin gonna sustain itself? And like there's no MEV right now on Bitcoin. And like if you really look at other chains, like uh transaction costs like get commoditized. Uh like a transaction doesn't cost that much to like verify. A signature doesn't cost that much to verify. And all the value actually comes from MEV. And if you really don't optimize from MEV, like eventually you're gonna be dead. You're not gonna be pay for the lights to be on. So like programmability in a sense also helps Bitcoin to like introduce some MEV into the system and for Bitcoin miners to be profitable once the block rewards are gone to zero.
It's kind of funny, Gauntlet, and I think Tarun had this interesting thing about like talking about how what? Dear God, man, I'm sorry, I'm still struggling from Singapore. Jeez, it was just me just being a retard, but like Turin had this interesting point about how MEV is a necessary evil in order to allow for financialization to occur on crypto networks, right? It allows for efficiency to be across the chain. So it creates the efficient capital market in a weird way. And it's like you have to have it. It's there in traditional financial systems itself, right? With payment for order flow, but this is obviously a more degen oriented kind of system. But it takes its roots there. And I kind of agree with that. I think that the Bitcoin narrative of like finding use, if you're a laser eye maxi that wants to be a cold storage dude, and what happens like 30 years from now, your only thing is like it wants to be digital gold. What happens if someone just decides to turn off one node of the network and then the other one because the OpEx costs are too high? So it is interesting that like you guys are
Like
bringing this.
actually, like if you look at the data, like most of the people, like Bitcoin miners right now are struggling. Like this pump will probably save a lot of Bitcoin miners. Like these people are struggling and are like issuing shares in order to pay for these bills because they're deeply unprofitable.
Yeah.
I
Like
think I
this
saw
pump is
somewhere like
probably gonna,
what's the actual economics? Like I think the cost of a block is around 72,000 right now, and the price of Bitcoin is 64, right, as of
Yeah.
yesterday. So, for the math nerds at home, that's negative 12, like what it is. So I say 72, 72, 64. I don't want to say like the wrong number, but yeah.
It's
It's
negative
negative.
69,000, bro. You're losing a fuck ton of money. That's what it
Yeah,
is, really.
yeah, you're losing money, and there needs to be, like some way of capturing that delta. We can't just hope for it to go up to infinity and continuing to pay for that. So, that's important.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And I think programmability is like the big kick that we all came to the program through, right? Like we're trying to bring utility to these UTXO chains outside of what traditionally people have said, like this is how we capture value through. Which is why I think it's really interesting what you guys are doing, really. I was curious, I know you mentioned this briefly in Singapore, Matt, was that like frost and roast. And I was wondering if you want to touch base on that. Like, we're not talking about coffee types. We're talking about like signature schemes and the async ability that Roast provides. But I'd love for you guys to like break this down. Like, let's dog feed this to me because as if like I don't know anything, which I don't know anything. So dog feed me Frost and Roast.
yeah. So basically, like it all starts to do with like trying to optimize like scripted multi-sigs. At first, like you needed like a script in order to like operate a multi-sig. That's not private. It also costs a lot, especially if you have like a big set. Uh, and people like came with ways to do scriptless multi-sigs using like music and stuff. But they also like had problems. For example, like music requires everyone to like be there when signing, and if one person signs, if one person doesn't sign, like you can't really like spend those UTXOs. So basically, like music requires enough N people to participate, and then came in like Frost, and they basically like did the thresholded signature scheme, which basically like you can do now like M of N people can sign, but it also has like uh, it was designed more for efficiency over robustness. So uh, you basically like need to choose a set of people to sign, and if one person doesn't sign, you can't really like do much. You need to like restart, choose like another set of people, which is like very bad, especially for like a chain that needs to like produce consistent blocks. So what Trust does is basically like a communication protocol on top of Frost. That's basically like gives you guarantees around robustness, and as long as you have like 51% of the network that is now malicious, you're gonna get a valid signature. And what it does is it basically like runs like parallel signing sessions, and basically like if like a signer is provably malicious, it basically like kicks him out of the whole group and keeps like running sessions in parallel until you get like a signature. And it gives you like guarantees around the signatures in N minus T rounds, which is really good.
So it's kind of like a wrapper around Frost itself, which is like a sig scheme, I guess. But like for you guys, that's one part of the secret sauce that allows for like this parallelized kind of ability for you to like basically push transactions through on Arch's like layer, I guess. That's what the way you guys are thinking about it.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people fail to realize, all the different designs or ways that multi-sigs play a part in programmability, right? Like in the case of Arch, like we're using this for a way to do conditional execution, right? Like we need the ability to shuffle assets around the Bitcoin network from from wallet to wallet, which is kind of how Dex is, how Borrowland, how all these different types of applications work at the end of the day using smart contracts. You need to have some type of trusted intermediary that says when this happens, this next thing will happen, and I have faith that the nodes will ultimately make that so. So, like, of course, we've heard the term multi-sig fi, and for the greater majority of a lot of the 100+ layer twos that exist today, like that is just a singular multi-sig that is storing people's assets, and they're doing state-only execution, and ultimately they're the ones that manage the assets that have been bridged to that chain. But in the context of Arch, we're using multi-sigs in a way that is more familiar in the Ethereum world, like smart contract controlled wallets or program derived addresses on Solana, depending on which camp you're really more intimately or understanding of. But this multi-sig piece is a very critical piece to be able to do that conditional execution that is part of Turing complete smart contracts. And if you don't have that, then we're back to square one with that whole peer-to-peer type of transactions, which of course you're in total control over your assets. You can sign with your keys for that specific function. But if we want to scale DeFi in a way that is more familiar to other chains, like we have to actually consider the architectural elements that are required, and that's where we have our Frost multi-sigs that allow for both the ability to do things on behalf of the user, but of course requires an honest majority of the nodes that have economic security and slashing risk kind of built in. So you have a limited set of trust assumptions, but you can have faith knowing that as long as there's plenty of economic security and these signers are still like Luga nodes and Kiln and Blockdaemon and Chorus One, all these big commercial validators, like they're still in business to do this sort of thing, signing with their keys, like that. Everything according to the smart contract should happen as it should. So that's how we're ultimately using this multi-sig architecture.
I was going to ask then, so like so this so if Roast is a wrapper around Frost and you want to create this new VM service for it, it allows for this huge throughput kind of ability that you can leverage from Bitcoin itself. And then obviously the assets flow. My question is like, what's next after DeFi? I mean, you talk about an AMM. Everyone loves an AMM. I love an AMM. But like, I'm just wondering, are you in a weird way building something that's like probably going to bring GameFi to like Bitcoin in a weird way? Because it's like, it's something that's more fun and enjoyable by possibly retail audience outside of just like a commercial, like, Chad degen audience. I'm just, throughput like this, I'm guessing would, because it's paralyzed, would offer a lot more potential.
Yeah, for like states only execution, if you're like running like states only transactions, like of course you can do like games on Hash. Yeah, for sure. But like what's interesting also like being able to like use these assets from Bitcoin and like use them on games. And something that's like really peculiar about like our architecture is that like basically devs get to choose like how much they want to settle back to Bitcoin. It's not really like a schedule that they have, but it's like the devs are in control and can decide like how much they want to settle back to Bitcoin, like what's the frequency, who pays for that, is it them, is the users. And also if they don't ever like wanna like settle back to Bitcoin that state, they can also do that, and it doesn't like affect anyone else beside them because all the states is isolated.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because you can kind of like customize that user experience in a way where you're still working with Bitcoin assets. You always have the ability to export that data back to the main chain and have your assets custody there. But for the time being, whichever amount of time that you want to give that experience, it's totally scalable, it's totally performant, it's basically Solana speed. And like you said, there can be an enormous, endless amount of different, whether it's GameFi, SocialFi, all these pro style features that are more familiar with other chains, like, creator tools, royalties, things of that nature are all possible inside of the network. And then, of course, once the user wants to back out of the system and onto the layer one, they have that optionality to do that. So I think it's quite interesting, the possibilities there.
Yeah, I asked because, like, I mean, that's the whole idea, right? You're trying to bring applications to Bitcoin. So, like, I mean, devs could have like a variety of things on the spectrum that could interest them. I know that, like, at Breakpoint, there was this huge section around GameFi itself, which kind of like everyone in the world was allocating to, and then it kind of like fizzled out. But now you're starting to see games and like that are out there, and you're like, oh wow, this is kind of becoming a thing. It'd be kind of wild to see if that could actually happen on Bitcoin too, right? A whole application layer on Bitcoin would be a wild, like, that's a simulation outcome that I did not predict,
Speaking of simulation and GameFi, so like if you were at Breakpoint, you probably saw the photo finish booth, which is like a simulation horse racing type of game, where you can either buy a track, buy a horse, you can gamble on a horse, whatever. And we're definitely interested in looking into how we can make some Bitcoin specific tracks and Bitcoin assets in that whole photo finish ecosystem. So we can bring that type of GameFi to more Bitcoin native audience. So certainly doable and not off the table. So we'll see how this whole degen and gambling and GameFi type of ecosystem on Bitcoin progress using Arch here pretty soon.
Yeah, for context, was it Photo Finish? Yeah, Photo Finish had this interesting booth. I would say the most interesting one outside of Star Atlas, because they had a huge space there. Who's funnily the head of engineering is also in Austin, by the way, kind of like random. But like they had this guy was an absolute Chad. He's like, yeah, bro, we basically allow you to bet on the ponies on Solana. I was like, well, what? And he's like, yeah, dude, it's pretty damn cool. And I'm like, yes, it is pretty damn cool. And they're sponsored by the Kentucky Derby or something like that. So it's wild. Right, yeah. When I ran into Matt and he was like, dude, they're coming on to us. And I was like, that's fucking awesome. Like, it's great that you guys are doing that, because it's like, I could see a bunch of Chads and Degens wanting to use it for sure. I know I would, and Rashad would for sure.
Yeah, people want to do stuff with their Bitcoin, man. They're getting bored. They're sitting on their hands over here. I think that there's some things to do in the whole degen ways right now. And I don't think there's any coincidence that Bitcoin's up right now. whether that has anything correlated to do with the the stock market or more of just this whole degen culture that we're starting to see. That's out for the discussion.
How hard were you fighting back to the urge? Like maybe it has something to do with Arch. Like I know you wanted to say it. I know it was like on the tip of your tongue. You were like, it's maybe because of us, bro.
Well, I've been on the record to say we're going to save everyone's bags, runes included. So, I'm not going to take that back now. It's just, obviously Arch is on testnet, so can't make any claims there quite yet.
That's awesome. I love it. Founders with balls are founders that go far. It's like you're willing to just take risks and put your shit out there. Gotta ask also, meta protocol wise, I know you mentioned like BRC20s, you mentioned runes. What are you thinking about like other meta protocols that are out there? I know like that question's been asked of us too, like even though we're building on a completely different sandbox with Doge. Curious T, what is your take? Is it like Tap coming also onto, Arch, CBRC20s, all this kind of stuff? Like we've been kind of myopic on our stuff and you have a better understanding of the Bitcoin space. I'm curious to see, are you guys like, hey, all these assets are more than welcome to come on?
I mean, that's an end result that we certainly would like to see is, while everything else is continuing to fragment liquidity and state, we're trying to reel it back in and aggregate as much of that as possible. So at the end of the day, any meta protocols, including other alternate VMs, they could technically live on Arch and use our verifier network to manage its state, right? So I think that's one of the realities that are potentially possible when this scales. And as far as BRC20 is concerned, we really think there's a lot of synergies there. They're going to be doing this whole programmability module on the layer one. BRC20 obviously already has a tremendous amount of support with both centralized exchanges and a bunch of Eastern whales. So in a way, there's ways where tokens can originate inside of Arch in this low fee and performant environment, but then automatically burn and then mint a BRC20 on the layer one. So sort of like this indirect pump fund type of dynamic where people can deploy things in a low fee and an efficient way inside of Arch, but then can technically back out onto the layer one and mint a actually native asset that has quite a bit of support in this this version or standard. So I think that these types of synergies are going to continue to exist as we scale the network, and all these meta protocols and alternate VMs are more than willing to leverage our infrastructure to do that.
One token protocol that's been like really interesting to see like how it plays out is like Catnip and Cat20 on Fractal. Now Fractal has like it's basically like a BRC for it's basically like a BTC fork with fast blocks. They enabled OpCat and like did some changes to the Bitcoin protocol. And people have been like playing around with these token protocols and claiming that they're basically gonna have like dexes on these like L2s on Fractal. The thing that they don't realize is that UTXOs have these like state concurrency issues, and I already know that you have built some stuff on Cardano, so I really want to hear your take on that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of funny. There's also these issues that are also plaguing in Dogecoin, right? Like, so we really had to come up with an interesting solution to that. That would have to go down to the infra level to like basically solve that. That's one of the big things that gave us an advantage. And also we had the opportunity of like also working with other indexing people that are native to Cardano who have also come to Bitcoin as well. Maestro and those guys, I'm sure you might have seen them. I know you might know Vardo and Marvin. They're good guys. Vardo is also part of ATX now. He's also practically a neighbor. He lives in Austin here. That's how we've really been able to solve this issue. It is an issue that plagues us, and it's an issue that like we think about reorgs and state issues like a lot that we have in Dogecoin. Right. In fact, there's like interesting attack vectors that are also open with it, like DDoS attacks and all this kinds of crazy shit that can happen. In fact, our exchange was trying to get attacked like a week before Breakpoint, which is kind of funny. But like, luckily, we nipped it in the bud and caught it before this was an issue that was occurring in terms of like really trying to just make the exchange go down. But I really got to say, it is kind of an issue that like we're also thinking about, and like also thinking about like really if we're scaling to like the next V3 version or the V2 version, like how do we really think about this? How do we really deal with this and not have to like, how do we like allow for the asset flow to go up, but like not have to deal with core kind of protocol changes or upgrades to the L1 itself, which as you guys know in Bitcoin, it's like nearly fucking impossible. It's kind of the same thing on Dogecoin too. Like you have these issues. So it is an ongoing thing that we're actively thinking about. I mean, it would be a lie if I didn't think about like it's like I did read your white paper on the 16-hour flight here. So it is like looking at it to be like, I was telling Matt, like, dude, we should do some crazy meme stuff. Like, and I mean, some crazy meme stuff. It could be interesting to think about also exploring like a secondary option with like Arch that would be Doge, right? It'd be hilarious.
I'm from Doge.
Yeah,
Action on
exactly.
Doge. Let's go.
But I think
By
it
the
is
way,
an
our white
interesting
paper does
solution.
not take 16 hours to read. Don't make it sound like you needed the whole flight to read it.
It's just because I'm a dummy and I kept resetting to like every single page back and back. But like, it is a good white paper though. But it is something that we really have thought about, and it is an issue. But like Cardano had the extended UTXO environment, right? So we got a little bit more gimmies than that of the UTXO environment, and also it's kind of differentiated for us because on Dogecoin we don't have like Lightning and Taproot and stuff like that, which are some of these kind of like levies, I guess you could think about to like utilize and then build like kind of AMMs on there. I know a few of the people that we know utilize that and leverage that to like basically do that, right? But yeah, it is something that is still like plaguing me and Rashad that we think about and we're like, how do we make this even better? But yeah, we might have to come back and look at Arch again and again. And until I just basically be like, okay, this is it. We're just fucking doing this.
The problem with like states concurrency issues is that there isn't a unique identifier to like contracts. Contracts are stored in UTXOs, and UTXOs are basically like destroyed every time you call a transaction. So there isn't this like unique identifier where you can like sequence the transactions one after the other. So what usually like happens, people like just if you have like 100 people on your app calling it, you basically like you have to send them the same like transactions to sign, and only one transaction goes through the chain because you can double spend the UTXO, and like you have 99 fair transactions. And since you don't have that ability to like sequence things, you basically like need to make a layer between like the main layer and like the app in order to do that. And that's what these like Bitcoin fork R2s I think are missing. And I think this is a problem that's also gonna like occur with Opcat if it's soft fork into Bitcoin. This problem is really worse. I'm kind of debating if it's worse on Bitcoin or not. Because if the chain is faster, you have more state concurrency issues.
Yes.
But if the chain is slower, there is also like a limit on Bitcoin for like how much transactions you can chain together in the mempool, which is kind of silly in my opinion.
It's kind of this weird kind of paradigm of like these two parameters which are pointing itself in either way. Because the EUTXO model, like if I remember correctly, like allows for this parallelized processing, right? Like that's kind of there. But of course, like, you know, for a while, smart contracts was there and it was a huge issue and all this stuff. There's also weird things with Dogecoin where you can only theoretically push like 33 transactions per second, which is kind of wild to think about compared to like, you know, others that are more performant that are like wilder. But I mean, for us, like we look at it as like the 1 minute block times at 33 transactions per second. I mean, our crazy thesis was that it just allows for more possibility for you to actually like use the thing rather than having 10 minutes, right? It just allows for a more retail oriented focus, plus the fact that there's other kinds of token kind of implications that are there itself. But I think that the state issues are something that plagues all these UTXO models that we don't get like an easy solution with that we could have gotten away with on ETH or Solana or AVAX or, you know, any of the other plethora of choices. But, you know, yeah, it's just something that me and Rashad will have to go back to and think about over and over again. Cause it's like, we always think about it and it's just like, we always go chicken or egg. It's like, do we go here and then solve this there? And then will we bridge the liquidity there, and that would happen this, or like, do we arch the liquidity to some place? You know, that's another thing that we're thinking about. I'm gonna use that term from now on. I love that actually.
See,
It's a nice
see what
little
I
plug
mean?
for you guys.
Exactly. Using arch as a verb now, it's perfect.
I love it.
Yeah, but I think that like these things are these are like core issues. I think that like it also comes into product, right? It from a founder perspective, it's like understanding what your users would want, where would they want to go, what is their use case in relation to your product. I think we get a little bit more of slack considering, you know, we're just doing memes and it's Dogecoin, right? Our motto is like externally seriously fun. Our internal motto is retarded first only, right? So now that's not very much of an internal motto, but like literally that's our company motto. So we get a little bit more gimme, but with you guys, like I think that you guys are building a serious product, you know, for serious people and serious like money flow coming through there. That value capture has to be there. So I think that these things, in terms of your roast like implementation over Frost, the parallelized VM functionality that it offers, the ground up build makes a lot more sense, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also like how these L2s when they come to market on Bitcoin, how they're gonna fix this. Because like if you really think about it, a bridge needs to have one state in order to like beg in and beg out people. I'm just like looking forward to seeing like 25 people being able to bridge out at a time. I think this is gonna cause bank runs on these
Yeah, I mean,
L2s.
needless to say, it goes to show that if you're talking about MEV style exploits, right? Those are huge MEV style exploits that can occur on both sides of these chains, right? Of these bridges. And there's huge attack vectors there. You know, like I'm not encouraging anyone to go look at it, but I'm pretty sure you guys can look at any plethora of like Cosmos SDK, Polkadot, EVM, all that stuff, and you can go become a student of that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see that like we're still like really early on the Bitcoin space. Like people haven't thought about like folks that ETH and Solana had to like fix.
Yeah, dude. I think you're still so early in that case. I really am looking forward to you guys. You said you're in testnet right now, right?
Yeah, we're technically on testnet. Like a couple of apps are already built on top of us. We've got like a Telegram group chat going on with the Arch ecosystem guys. All the apps are built on top of us just to like garner ideas and like garner discussions between these people. And yeah, we're looking to like launch our incentivized testnet pretty soon. Yeah.
That's awesome. So speaking about folks that maybe want to build with you, like what's available to them to do that? So if maybe Ash and I are going to set up our prediction market or maybe our game, like what would we where would we start with that? Like getting contact with you, or is there tooling available, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the first step would be go to our website. There's a builder's form to fill out. And alongside of that, since we are in the incentivized testnet period, there's an additional like incentivized testnet application as well. So as a project, you can apply for some of the rewards that we are going to be pushing out to not just users, but also developers. So we will, to be considered for that, you need to fill out the incentivized testnet form as a builder. There's also a lot of resources in our Discord where you can go and get hands-on support from our DevRel and some other community members who have been trying to deploy or have successfully deployed over the last couple months. There's a lot of developer documentation online. So you go to docs.arch.network /book. Like other VMs, we have like a whole book that goes over some of the guides and tutorials for that. And then finally, we have some SDKs that we've developed for spinning up, a vault or some of the precursors to what you're going to want to use for building. So all that is available. So join the ecosystem through one of those mechanisms and get a conversation started. Our pipeline is getting bigger and bigger every single day. So the people that are kind of working a little harder at trying to deploy in the CLI or local environment first, that they kind of get a little more priority. And yeah, happy to kind of let you guys dive in and then figure out how we can best serve you once you're in the ecosystem.
Yeah, we're also like actively working with projects, like seeing what are their pain points, trying to like get feedback from that, implemented into the VM, or like make tools that help them like develop apps easier on Arch and get to production.
That's awesome. Are you guys doing any hackathons or anything like that? Like I know we just came out of Breakpoint in Solana. I know that the Bitcoin Olympics stuff is also going on. Or like, what are you guys doing? How's a good way for them to get like real kinetic and tactile with the SDK?
So we had a track in the Bitcoin Olympics, which I think recently ended right before Korea Blockchain Week. So we will have another hackathon running October 15th, I believe it starts with BiddleBox, the same group that does Eat Denver and a few other like Permissionless and a few other big conferences. So we did a hackathon with them for that. Which will also have some prizes and grants and all this other things included as well. We should be doing one with DevCon in Thailand in partnership with Code and Club or Code Club, I think is what it's called. Yeah. So that will happen closer to DevCon in November, and we'll constantly be doing things like that to try to just keep accelerating the ecosystem and building smart contracts on Bitcoin. So anything that we can do to kind of help move things along in terms of incentives, grants, and these hackathon prizes, that's what we're doing. But like Amin said, we were kind of focused a little bit more on developer experience, enhancing that last month, and now we're finally there. So that's why we're kicking off the big incentivized campaign, so users can finally come in and deploy successfully.
That's awesome. I know I'm going to be looking forward to that track. I'm guessing with BiddleBox, it's going to be at Permissionless. I know me and Rashad are going to be there. I'm guessing I'm going to see you there, Matt. I don't know if you're much of a skier. I think you might just probably stay in Morocco for that one, most likely.
I'll probably come to Thailand for DevCon. Really interesting stuff.
Okay. You go to the exotic ones. Okay. All right. Yeah. Probably. Yeah. We're probably going to be missing Thailand. We're going to be hodling back into the basement actually after Permissionless and just like shipping for the rest of the year. But dude, like that is so awesome that you guys are doing this. It's also really great to get like new devs from ETH and like Solana also to come explore this. It makes a lot of sense. I guess I got to say, man, I'm just happy to see another fisherman from the program out here. Like both of you guys made it out. I know it's kind of crazy in the program. They say, like it's very hard for you to make it, let alone get an idea. But like you guys not only got an idea, but you guys made it, which is fucking awesome, man. So I'm happy for y'all.
Yeah, well, we still got a lot of work to do. Raising money is one thing. It's launching and scaling a network that is entirely another animal, and we're locked in and focused on that. So that's there's plenty of time before we can take congratulations, I think. So talk to us probably maybe Eat Denver next year after we've done mainnet, and we're well into the next cycle of growth.
Hell yeah, guys! Hell yeah! I'm rooting for you, boys.
This has been awesome, guys. I'm really excited about what y'all are building. So if folks do want to kind of get in touch with you or kind of follow what you're doing, can you kind of just share where do they follow you on socials? Where do they find Arch Network? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the Arch Network Twitter is probably our most active account. So if you want to follow us there, there's some links in the bio, along with the Discord link, website link, etc. If you want to directly reach out via the Twitter, we've got someone that answers that pretty actively. But otherwise, if you're a builder, hop onto the website and build out or fill out that builder's form. And that's a great place to start. We'll have someone from the BD team reach out, and then we'll get a group chat going. We'll get you integrated with the Arch ecosystem chat that Amin mentioned is growing every single day. We'll figure out what stage you're at, where you need the most help, and then that's what we're all about, is just providing whatever support that we can to help you guys be successful as a developer. Of course, if you're a user, jump into the Discord and just stay tuned for more updates, because there will be a tremendous amount of incentives geared towards supporting the apps that are going to deploy into the testnet and mainnet.
That's awesome, man. We're going to put it on all your socials on the pod over here. And if anyone that I run into and they say that, hey, they want to be Bitcoin and looking at building something interesting on there, I'm definitely going to plug them your way. You guys are on the top of that list now. I know both of you guys are good people, and you guys are actually shipping, which is kind of nice compared to some other people who are just fucking LARPing. Like, but that, so it's really, really rare. But yeah, dude, I gotta say thank you very much for you guys to come and do this. And yeah, I can't wait to see you, see Matt again at Permissionless. I mean, I'm gonna miss you, buddy. Sometime next year, we got to catch up though and put the gang back together and do some beers, do some brews. You know, that would be good.
Definitely
Yeah, for
will.
sure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the ATX DAO podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. To learn more about ATX DAO, visit us at atxdao.com and follow us on X, Farcaster, and LinkedIn at ATX DAO. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.